Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Meena, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's such a pleasure to be talking to you, Andrea.
Meena, you have transitioned from being a lawyer and working in the corporate world to becoming a high performance coach. I would love for you to share the journey of that transition and the ups and downs that came with it.
Wow, what a loaded question. Well, I think this is something that would help a lot of people. So thank you for asking that question. First of all, I started as a lawyer. Then I transitioned to becoming chief marketing officer, and I got into sales and business development. And now I've transitioned to become a business and high performance coach for female entrepreneurs. So as you can see in my journey, I've transitioned quite a lot. There's such a huge difference in the way I transitioned while in corporate and when I left corporate. And the challenges I faced were different. When I was in corporate, even though initially I started as a lawyer and then went on to marketing and business and sales, the transition was not hard simply because I came from a legal background, but I was always working in house in companies where I was exposed to business deals. And the people I advised internally were the different departments who were doing the business deals. So I was already aware of the business deals. I helped them negotiate better business deals. So, in that sense, the transition was not hard. The hard part was, though, that every time I got into a new role, it was often that I got underestimated by my peers as well as HR, because regardless of how much the world has changed, I find that in a lot of companies, people have a very rigid perspective. So if you started out as a lawyer and then you got into marketing, regardless of what you've achieved in your previous jobs, they don't really pay attention to that. They pay attention to, oh, why is it that you're a lawyer and you got into marketing? And they don't necessarily ask that in a good way. It's sometimes like, are you confused? Can't you make up your mind kind of thing? Whereas, in my opinion, it is a strength rather than a weakness, because when you learn how to get from legal to marketing, you understand so many different aspects of a company. And I feel that that is what made me excel in what I did, because I don't negotiate vague deals since I have a legal background. When it comes to marketing, I can be very strategic because I have this ability to think very analytically. But it was often not seen that way by peers as well as human resources, simply because of that narrow perspective. But after that, when I transitioned to becoming my own boss, that part was something I really struggled with. And I did not anticipate that I was going to have this struggle. You know, you take for granted so many things when you're in corporate. First of all, you know that if you work really hard, there are times you'll have good days, there'll be times you'll have bad days, but you'll still have a paycheck at the end of the month. When you're working on your own, unless you really put in the effort and work on money making activities, you don't get paid. That was something that was really hard. And I think the second most important thing that, again, I did not expect I would struggle with is when you've worked in corporate for many, many, many years, you don't realize that that paycheck somehow validated you. And when I started working on my own, when I wasn't making the same level of money initially, I used to feel very unworthy. I used to feel less than. I used to think I wasn't good enough. But over time, when I started realizing that it was just my perspective and that it was the same me that was able to create those results in corporate, I could actually achieve the same results in my own business. But it took a lot of inner work, and it took a lot of submitting to your ego dying for you to be able to almost be reborn, because it's a completely different personality, it's a completely different mindset, and it really humbles you. And I think that's a very, very much needed transition for people who want to start over in their life.
Thank you for sharing that journey. And I fully resonate with everything you have shared. And the challenges often, whether it's even transitioning from one role to another, or even one industry to another, there's just so much resistance. And I fully agree with you that that's actually a strength, that the new ideas and perspectives that a person brings, that has a wealth of experiences that complement other people in the team, is just so incredible when we're looking specifically in the corporate world. You mentioned earlier that your focus has been intentionally on women. I want you to share with us, if you can please, why you think it's so crucial to empower more women in the realm of coaching, self confidence, and wealth building.
I think a lot of people misunderstand what it is to empower women and why it is necessary. It's important to have the context. Now, I can share my personal story and my background, but I think in some shape or form, this is something that is applicable to almost every culture and in every different part of the world. My background is I am of Indian origin, born in Indonesia. And when I was born at that time, I didn't see any women around me that were financially independent or educated, because the women in my time were groomed to become submissive, because their role in life was to become a housemaker and to listen to their husband and to be financially dependent on their husband. Since I was a child, I just felt there was something wrong with that picture, simply because I witnessed my mom almost give away their personal power. And that was something that really broke my heart, because I didn't understand why God would create us as individuals to come into the world only so that we are supposed to play a certain role. And it felt almost like robotic for me, and I just didn't think that made any sense. And that's why I decided to carve my own path to become educated and financially independent. And I was the first educated and the first financially independent woman in my family. Of course, that came with a lot of struggle, because in any society, when you try to be different from what is expected out of you, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of like pressure to fit in, there's a lot of criticism. And every step of the way, I didn't allow that to stop me, because my eye was on the prize, on the goal, because I knew that unless and until I had that financial independence, there is no way in the world I would be able to decide how I want to live my life. And once I had that, I was able to look back and even look at the women around me. And I realized that simple choice of betting on myself, that simple choice of dedicating myself to my dream really paid off, because I now have the freedom that so many women do not have. And my heart goes to them. And so that is how it was for me. But when I look at other cultures, there is somehow somewhat a similar story, even if we're talking about that happening in this generation. And even if we're talking about the West, because the fact is, every single woman I know, to a large extent, has had some kind of expectation put on them in terms of the role that they must play in society. For example, if you're a mother, or you are like a single mother, there is this expectation that, oh, now your life is about your child, and your dreams don't matter anymore, because now your role is to fuel the fire in your child to follow their dream. For me, that's really sad, because I don't think it needs to be an either or situation. I think as a mother, the best example you can give your daughter, your son, is to be living proof that you should continue to follow your dreams for as long as you live. And sacrificing on your dreams and becoming a martyr is not the way to go. And a lot of women I know are trapped in marriages that they would rather walk away from, but they don't have that financial independence. A lot of women struggle to be able to give their kids the best that is possible, only because they don't have the financial means to afford the life that they crave and their kids crave. This is why I think it's so important for women to understand that there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do because of what has been projected onto us. And once we unlearn that, we can become very aware and conscious of the fact that we are creators of our own life. And if we are creators, slowly, one by one, we have to eliminate all the excuses or all the limits that we think we have, and start taking responsibility on how we can start making decisions that take us to a different direction.
That is so beautiful and so inspirational. When I'm just thinking about some women that want to move away from a specific situation that indeed is hindering their ability to truly live fully and joyfully, how have you come to guide some of your clients in the process of that growth, that personal evolution, while also incorporating joy in that change process?
I'll share with you two or three stories which really has humbled me so much and which has really touched my heart. I had a client who was chief financial officer of a company in the UK. She also qualified as a master NLP coach. She absolutely hated her job, didn't have the guts to quit because she was living in a £60,000 debt. And so she was stuck in a vicious cycle of living the life she hated, having this money thing looming over her, but at the same time, having these dreams and aspirations to become a coach so that she could make money out of changing other people's lives, which was her passion. But she did not have the courage. And so I have a program called Empowered Women Academy, and that program is more about helping women tap into their personal power and learning a lot of the things, letting go of a lot of the traumas that was projected onto us when we were kids. And so while I worked with her through this program, one of the things that became really apparent was that when she was a child, she went through so much abuse that even though she was in her 50s, the 5 year old her was still very alive in the body of the 50-year-old. And the 5 year old was still living her fears. The 5 year old still believed in limitations. The 5 year old still believed she was not good enough. And so when she started letting go of all those things and understanding that that was something that no longer was true in her present moment, because all of us carry those traumas and allow those traumas to dictate our future. When she was able to let go of that, there was so much freedom and so much energy that was released in her life. And it gave her the ability and the courage not only to believe in herself, but to actually take the action towards becoming a coach. In about a year, not only did she quit her job, she was making multiple six figures and she already was able to settle her £60,000 debt. That is one story, which is something that really touches my heart so much. And then I had another client who was a banker who was very, very successful. But after an 8 year run, which was an incredible run because she was really very much cherished by her boss as a high achiever, after 8 years, she just hit a level where she was constantly anxious and she wanted to quit her job. But her boss didn't let her because she was such a high achiever. And he said, you can take, like, a few months paid leave and I will pay for whether you need a therapist or whatever the case may be. I'll pay for it, but don't quit. And she said, fine. But as it so happened, for 2 months she was consulting psychiatrist, and I think she was being given pills or something. And according to her, she got these pills and she used to also always throw them because she just didn't believe in pills. But somehow she ran into her ex-colleague, and her ex-colleague's wife was my client. And so when they had a conversation and she asked her, how are you doing? She said, not good. I'm still not doing well. And she said, I know who you should talk to. You need to talk to Meena. So I had a conversation with her, and in one call, she was just sharing a lot and she was crying. And she said, I got so much more out of this call than working with my psychiatrist for 2 months. She said, how can I work with you? So we started working together. And it was such a beautiful journey because in 6 months, her level of anxiety was so bad that she needed to always have the music on 24/7. She needed to have the lights on 24/7. So the music needed to be on even when she was in the shower because she could not handle the silence. And the transformation was so beautiful. In less than 3 months, she was able to let go of the music. She was able to let go of the lights. And there was this desire that I'm meant for something else. And actually, during the first session I had with her, I could already tell that she wasn't cut out to be a banker. She should be doing something else. I could already tell. But after she was able to let go of a lot of the things, she said she had a desire to start her own business. And her business was to start keto snack brand. And this was during the pandemic. And so she said that was a vision. And she said, but it's the pandemic. Nobody's going to be able to visit a physical store. Nobody's going to be. And I'm like, why do you need to wait to open a physical store? You can start right here, right now from your home. And she was like, wow, I never thought about that. So then we started focusing on her business, building her business. And it was so interesting that in a matter of like 2 months, there were times she had to postpone our coaching calls because she had so much of requests and orders for the things that she was creating at home that she just was not able to fit in the calls that we were having. And so it was such a beautiful journey that I got to witness and to see the amazing changes she was having in her life. And I'll tell you one more story. I had a 26-year-old who was working also in corporate, and she always knew she was meant for something else. She started her business, but she just was very half-hearted about it because she didn't think she had what it took. In about few weeks of working together, she realized the reason the voice in her head, the inner critic, was actually her boss. Basically, her boss kept making her feel unworthy and kept making her believe she wasn't good enough. And she realized that that was what was feeding into her insecurities. So she let go of the job and she focused on her business. After a few months, I got in touch with her to ask her for a testimonial, and she's a 26-year-old. And when I asked her for a testimonial, her business had expanded to 11 countries. And for me, that was like, wow, what an incredible, incredible transformation to see a person be able to let go of so many of the things that was holding them back and go up to a completely different direction. So those are some of the examples.
I really love the stories, and I was wondering if you could dig deeper and share some insights, particularly of the mindsets that, as you've shared, some women may hold that I am not enough. And I know you focus on integrating principles of neuroscience and quantum physics that are really effective in tapping into seeing the possibilities and the potential that we each have within us. Can you share some tips, some insights for some of our listeners that may be having that mindset that could be hindering their capacity today to really live more fully and with more joy?
So, I think I'll address one thing, which there's going to be many different fears that play into it. There's a lot of fears. Sometimes it's about what we call imposter syndrome, the not good enough. Sometimes it's about I genuinely don't think I have the right experience. Sometimes it's about this is not the right time. Sometimes it's about I don't have the finances. It's all of these different things that is holding us back. And so, what I usually do is when I work with clients, since every client is so different and they all come with different set of beliefs, different set of limitations. But generally, I notice that the fears are more around these things. So, what tends to happen, I think, with us as individuals is we are always looking at our life from a perspective of our past. And when we can start becoming aware of the fact that the perspective we have is actually not a fact. I always give this example. It's almost like wearing a rose tinted glasses, you know. If your glass is rose tinted, unless you remove the glasses and look at the glasses, you don't see that it's rose tinted. But if you have it on, all you see is everything is going to have this kind of rose filter on it. And when someone tells you that it doesn't have the rose filter, you will insist and you will say, no, it's a fact. The fact is, it's not a fact, it's a perspective. So before we can start telling people, oh, you should believe in yourself, you should do this, you should do that, it's more like turning inward and asking yourself, where did this come from? How did I come to this belief? What was it in the past that made me believe this? Because unless and until we are able to become very self aware and notice where these things come from and start realizing that it may have been quote unquote true at that point in time, does it necessarily mean it's true at this point in time? And a lot of times, what I think we don't realize is that every decision we make in our life comes from our state, or what, a lot of times we say our way of being. Because if I feel I'm not good enough, I will not apply for that job. If I feel I'm not good enough, I will not start my personal brand. If I feel I'm not good enough, I will not start my own business. But once you start shifting how you think and feel, your actions change. And so, unless and until you're able to identify and become very self aware of what are the things that are holding you back, and uncover it one by one, and asking yourself, where did you learn this from, and what can you learn, which is new, that will not change. In my own example, when I first started my business, I came from corporate, and I was doing very well in corporate. I had the corner office, I had a fat paycheck, reporting directly to a high net worth individual. And when I left corporate, I didn't really think about the things I took for granted when I was in corporate. So when I first started working for myself, I was nobody. On the internet, when you start your brand, everybody's starting from square one. I didn't really have the upper hand because nobody knew me. People knew me for who I was in that company. People didn't know me as a brand. So when I was first starting out, I struggled immensely, immensely, because my identity took such a huge hit, and I kept asking myself, what the heck? Why am I here? Why people should know me? The sense of self entitlement. People should know me. People should already. And then I realized, no, they don't. Why should people know me? And then came in the inner critic. You're not good enough. You don't have what it takes. Maybe you succeeded in corporate because it's XYZ, because we tend to invalidate our own successes, right? And then we focus very much on, our own flaws. So I was very focused on who I wasn't, and I didn't really take into account everything that I'd achieved. So I did just one simple thing. When I felt like an imposter, when I felt I just was not good enough, I said to myself, how about this? I'll take a piece of paper and write down facts of everything that I achieved. It's one thing to think about it, and it's another thing to write it. I always tell my clients, write it. You will be surprised. It's so different when you write it versus talking about it. So I started writing everything that I'd achieved in life. I qualified as a solicitor in the UK. I qualified as an attorney in New York. I worked as a chief marketing officer in the largest public listed company, cable listed company in Indonesia. I was covered in Globe Asia as the top negotiator. I wrote down all of these things, and then I looked back and took an objective view, and I looked at it, and I'm like, oh my God, I achieved quite a bit. Why in the world did I think I wasn't good enough? Because it's irrational. How we think and feel is irrational. So when I started looking at that, I kept focusing on the fact that I had what it takes to succeed. And once I shifted that, my actions changed. And that's why I think focusing on our own inner, critic, and shifting that language, and being always invested on our growth is so, so important, regardless of where you are in your journey.
And I fully agree. And as you were describing these stories of these three women that you have inspired to pursue their dreams and that are on the path of growth and success, it's so beautiful to see. As they've grown as a human being and have changed their perspectives, their mindsets, they're also now becoming leaders of their own brand, leaders of their own companies. I was curious to get your views on what advice would you have for individuals that really want to integrate more self awareness and elevate their leadership capacity as they are growing their businesses?
One of my favorite quotes is by Tony Robbins, and he says that we tend to overestimate what we can achieve in a day and underestimate what we can achieve in a year. And that is something I really focus on and I get my clients to focus on. We tend to quickly put ourselves down as a failure when we don't achieve something in the first attempt. Or we tend to compare ourselves to others and think like, if they were able to go from 0 to 6 figures in 3 months, why have I not achieved anything in 2 years? And then you take it as personally and like, I'm not good enough, you know? So what I do is I really unpack every single excuse that we give ourselves for not overcoming an obstacle in order for us to move forward. And a lot of these obstacles are, like I said, comparison, setting a timeline that if I don't achieve something at a certain time means I'm a failure or like I will give up. And then at the same time, it's like having this expectation that if I have a business, everything should run smooth. People have this belief that success is a straight line. And what I do is I really get them to understand that there are few variables in business that you have control over. There are other variables that is not within your control. So, for example, if you are starting out and you want to start building your personal brand, what you are in control of is knowing what you stand for, how aligned is what you stand for with your business, what are the core values of you and your business, what is your content pillar, and how you put yourself out there, the kind of content you create that aligns with all of this, how you create a community around it, how you engage with people, how much time you're able to dedicate to it. You are in charge of all of these variables, but you are not in charge of how quickly you grow. You're not in charge of the algorithm. You're not in charge of why and how a certain person got to a certain level, but you didn't. What I usually get my clients to do is to focus on the process. You know, we're talking about joy, right? So I think it's a fallacy to think that I will only be happy when I achieve those 6 figures. Because you know what? That will only last all of 5 minutes. Because when you achieve that 6 figures, you'll want to get to that 7 figures or the multiple 6 figures. So you should never live your life based on a belief that I will be unhappy until I get there. If you fall in love with the process and enjoy every aspect of what you do, then your business is already succeeded because the success matrix that you've placed on it, it is only a matter of time for you to get there. There are so many successful people in the world, but not everybody is successful and happy. And I think it is so important for us as women to learn to sometimes lean into our feminine energy and sometimes into our masculine energy when we are working on our business. Because when we're working on our business, it should not only be about the hustle, it should also be about how sometimes we can step back, we can enjoy it. We can enjoy the process, fall in love with what we do. Because when we do that, even when we achieve those 6 figures, the 7 figures, you're not going to look back and say, oh my God, those 5 years were miserable. You're going to say, I created an incredible 5 years. I enjoyed the business that I was building, you know, and I became the person who I'm today because of the entire process. So anytime we fail, I think it's important for us to detach ourselves from that failure and the ego that we have attached to it, instead of failing and looking at failure as an identity. I am a failure. Look at failure as an event. Okay, it's we failed at this. Why and how can we improve this? Because failure doesn't stop you. What stops you is you accepting failure as like something final and fatal, and that's when you don't continue again. So these are the things that I really get people to prepare in advance so that by the time they start taking action, if they have problems that they face, they won't think like, that's it, you know, I'm not going to go ahead. It's really like preparing when you're in the army and you're preparing for war or you're going to battle, or whether you're going to have a surgery, right? I'm sure the surgeons are trained that, you know, they're going to have a procedure, but in the event something else goes wrong, You're not going to see a surgeon say, oh my God, I'm a failure, let the patient die, right? You're not going to see that. You're going to see a surgeon say, okay, this was not foreseen. Quick, what are we going to do? How are we going to go around this, right? Because a life depends on you. So I think it's really important for us to be prepared for the other things that we're not in control of to happen, but also at the same time have the grace to be able to handle it without thinking, oh my God, the world is over.
I had another question that relates to women that are envisioning to start their own business ventures, and often access to funding is very, very limited. Some have the capacity, as you've shared, to potentially build a certain level of comfort, maybe because of an existing job, before they actually venture themselves into a new business and so on. Others do not necessarily have that reality, right? They may be a mom that has been taking care of their children, as you described earlier. And sometimes we look at the lack of access to funds, if you wish, as something that is potentially hindering our ability to move forward, to start something new, to pursue our dreams. And I was wondering if you could share any insights for those groups of individuals or women that are saying, wow, I cannot actually live my dream because of the financial barrier that they are currently seeing as something that is hindering their capacity to actually even just initiate a transformation.
Usually when you want to start your own business, depending on what business you want to start, I think when you're talking about funding, there's two different possibilities. One is wanting to start a business that actually requires funding, which requires investment. And then one is actually starting like a service-based business where you don't need investment. But in that case, you still need to make sure that you have enough money to be able to live, so that you don't put yourself in a position where I don't have money, I can't feed myself, I can't feed my kids. I will give you an answer for both of it. So, first of all, if you're a business that actually requires funding as a business, there are so many organizations and associations now that are investing in businesses. And in order for you to be able to access it, I think that's more like step 5 or step 10. Before you even get there, first is formulating your business idea, starting something really small to be able to prove that this is something that actually works, because no investor wants to put money in a business which is just an idea, which doesn't have any data, no information on return on investment, the possibilities and all of that. So I think first of all the groundwork needs to happen, creating that business, starting it, even if it's with your own money, even with family and friends, starting that business, being able to get some traction, being able to prove that there is actually a future in this business, and then only access organizations and that are able to not just invest but give you advice. For example, for many years, I was a mentor for Endeavor. Endeavor is a nonprofit that exists all over the world. And what they do is they bring in qualified people like myself to coach businesses for them to grow. And these are businesses who are at a stage where they don't, it's a very promising business, but they don't have the money to be able to hire a coach. And so there are so many nonprofits like that that put together people who are mentors and people who are businesses, and in that circle sometimes you find investors, so I think ultimately if you want to make something happen, you will always make it happen. But sometimes we overthink it, and as a result of that we don't take action. We say, oh, there is no funding, but the funding is step 5 or step 10. What about all these other steps that you need to be taking first, right? Unless and until you take these steps, you don't know if there is a potential. That's one aspect if you need funding. Now, if you don't need funding, but you still need to make sure you have enough money, I will never advise people who have this passion to, okay, you're in corporate, quit corporate and start your passion. I will never advise that, because the reality is a lot of people need that income to be able to sustain themselves and their family. But you need to have a plan, even if it's like, okay, I cannot afford to quit my job, and I absolutely hate my job, or whatever the case may be. Or even if I don't hate my job, I have this passion and I have this skill, and I know I'm able to make so much money out of it. Great. Dedicate 1 hour a day. And a lot of people say, I don't have an hour a day. Really? You can watch Netflix, you can do so many other things. How is it that billionaires have the same 24 hours as you do, but they still have the time to be able to make billions of dollars? Yes, they have a team, but they didn't start there, you know? So sometimes we also have to like call ourselves out for the excuses we're making. And if we say, okay, well, I don't have an hour a day, fine. Do you have 2 hours a week? Somewhere I'm sure you can find it. At least if you dedicate 2 hours a week to try something new, to learn a new skill, to start your business, to start your personal brand, to talk to people in that industry that you want to, start a business in, start taking small consistent action. Because when you start taking small consistent action, it all starts creating momentum, and it all compounds. So I think what really gets people scared is they think of the goal as a very big goal, and they think that I don't have and it's never going to get there. And I'm like, no, focus on the small goals first. Focus on the small goals, because slowly, 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 you're going to get there. But it's what you're telling yourself that's stopping you from being able to do that.
Very valuable advice. Thank you, Meena. And if we could look at the future landscape of women in business in the coming years, and if we really look at the empowerment of women within organizations or within their own ventures, what is one final word of advice that you would have for those women that are, as I said, envisioning a better future for themselves?
What I would say to every woman is stop looking for evidence that it's possible, be the evidence. Because we, as women, have role models, but not as many role models as men have. Because since the beginning of time, the role of women in society and in the workplace has changed drastically. And according to a lot of people, it hasn't changed enough, which I agree, it hasn't. But having said that, we are actually making a lot of progress. And if we are making a lot of progress, the reason we're able to make a lot of progress is because there have been women before us who did not wait for the right opportunity. They did not wait to be handed down that power. These are women who created this opportunity for themselves, so that women like you and I are able to live the life we live today. And I think what we need to be doing for ourselves and for the generation after us is to focus on how we too can lead the way and create possibilities for the women who come after us, who would have normally thought that this was not possible. So we tend to have this fear because it's never happened before, like the 4 minute mile, right? But in my opinion, I always say, if it's going to happen, I know I have what it takes to make it happen. Instead of waiting for other people to prove it's possible, you need to be the proof.
On those final words, Meena, thank you immensely for your time and the wisdom you have shared. It's been a great, great pleasure, and look forward to continuing the conversation at another time and learning about the wonderful things that you're doing in the future.
Thank you so much, Andrea.